Everyone. Today we are tackling how to stop blanking and think clearly under interview pressure. So, my name is Madeline Sprinkle. I'm a PhD candidate in industrial organizational psychology, which is essentially psychology in the workplace. But I also run my own interview coaching business for high achieving professionals.
Amazing. And so nice to meet you. My name is Jeffrey, and like Madeline, I'm also doing my PhD in psychology. And what I do is I'm really passionate about making storytelling and public speaking as accessible as possible for professionals, especially tech professionals. Um, and that's the kind of work that we're going to talk about in today's Maven workshop. So, what are we going to do? We have three things. Number one, we're going to talk about the psychology of blanking. Why is it that we end up blanking from a psychological perspective? Number two, we're going to talk about what happens before the interview that you can do to prevent blanking from happening in the first place. And last but not least, Madeline's going to talk more about what are some strategies that you can do that if blanking does end up showing up, which for a lot of people it does end up happening, how can you recover it and get your feedback up and still do a really good interview at the end? Okay, so let me paint a quick scenario and let me know in the chat afterwards if this has ever happened to you. You're at an interview, you're super prepared, you feel really comfortable, but then right when you're at the very end, you're at the last stage of the interview process, you get hit by a really challenging curveball question. And you feel it. Your heart starts racing, you start sweating, you lose track of time, you don't know the words to say, and your mind completely goes blank. Let us know in the chat if this has ever happened to you. Ever. Come on, I've been there so many times.
I've been there too. Yep. And it's so
Yes,
stressful and
Alan, many
pressured.
times. Yes, Nicola, yes, yes. That's it. We've all been there. Blanking happens to every single person. And you know what's really funny is that Madeline and I, we do a lot of public speaking for our professional careers, and we blank,
Yep.
honestly, like either all the time or like in most speeches. It just happens. But what's
Hmm.
really important to know is that blanking is not the worst thing that can happen to you. A lot of people think it is. It's really not. The actual worst thing that can happen to you in an interview is you blank, that makes you spiral, and that affects the rest of your interview. That's the thing that you don't want to happen. So, here in this workshop, we're going to show you how you can shift your mindset from, oh God, blanking's going to happen to me, I'm going to fuck up, and it's going to completely make me spiral, to, you know what, blanking happens, but we can not only prevent it, we can also recover from it so that it doesn't affect the rest of our talk or speech or interviews. Okay, so I'm going to pass it off to Madeline now to talk
All
more
right.
about the psychology of
Perfect.
blanking.
So let's focus on why do we blank? What is happening there and the psychological side of things. So I want you to imagine your brain as this dark room full of furniture. And you have this spotlight, which is essentially your working memory. So, your working memory is what allows you to retrieve information, to hold on to facts, to think on the spot, all of that stuff that's required in interviews. And when you're in a normal day-to-day situation, this spotlight is really big. Look at the picture on the left side. You can think fairly quickly. You're not too stressed. It's easy to retrieve information. What happens when you're under stress is this spotlight narrows. So with the image on the right, all of a sudden, you can't really focus on that specific example you know is there, but you just can't remember it, or everything just feels like it's so much more work. And so that's what's happening when we're blanking, is this spotlight is narrowing because we're under the cognitive load and we're under this high pressure, stressful situation. So, why do high achievers actually blank out more often? And this is something that Jeffrey and I have really noticed where people are really prepared, they've done the work, but for some reason they're the ones who are struggling to answer questions on the spot. And this is because for high achieving individuals, you have high internal standards that you've set for yourself, and you're often monitoring in the interview how you think this is going. You have a big fear of making a mistake. You want this interview to go perfectly. And so, what happens is this adds a ton of cognitive load and pressure to your working memory, which means that spotlight is getting so much more narrow, causing you to not be able to retrieve that information. And so, what we want to focus on today is figuring out strategies to help you preserve that wide spotlight, even under stress. So, preserve your working memory and to also encourage flexibility in your responses. So, you're never going to hear Jeffrey and I say, you should memorize your answer word for word. We really want to encourage cognitive flexibility, which we'll dive into in a little bit. You also want to prepare for and embrace this idea of mistakes because often what happens is we get so stressed with this little hiccup that we're dedicating so much mental effort to overcoming that. What are they thinking of that? Oh no, now all our time is spent on that rather than our actual responses. All right, pass it off to Jeffrey.
On that note, as you said, Madeline, a lot of stopping blanking, funny enough, actually happens not during the interview, but everything that happens is during the preparation process, which is before your interview. Now, here's what we often see with the people that we work with. If you're a high achiever, you want absolute control. So this is what you do. You list every single possible question, you have a script for each question, you memorize a question, and then you rehearse the question in a predictable environment. This might be your home, a library, your office, a room you're really comfortable in, but all this is to create what's called an artificial sense of confidence because you feel really comfortable because you know what's going to happen and you've practiced these similar situations over and over again in an environment that is very predictable. But here's why this can end up hurting you. In an interview, you're not in a predictable environment. You're actually in a very uncertain environment. So, what you have to do is prepare for that uncertainty. And here's how you're going to do it. What we recommend to all our clients is yes, the first tab can be the exact same. You can list every single possible question that you think you might ask. You can use ChatGPT for this. You can get a list of questions online, whatever you want to do. But instead of scripting out every single response, you're going to have stories based on your experiences of success working in different companies, and you're going to map on these stories to these different questions. And that way, you can remember the stories. You don't have to stick with a perfect response every single time. Now, the other thing that we really recommend that you do is, and a lot of people neglect actually, is a lot of people don't warm up before their interviews. And here's why you should warm up. It's because if you create a 10-minute vocal and a mindset warm up for yourself, you create a sense of predictability, which is going to really help you when you enter that unpredictable environment, which is going to be your interview. And the last thing that a lot of people neglect, but we absolutely recommend that you do, is you have to practice answering in a simulated stressful environment. That means you have to practice actually blanking and then recovering from it. And we promise you that if you follow these steps, you're going to achieve a level of confidence that you don't even need your script in the first place.
Mm.
Now that was a lot, and we're not gonna dive into like the story part because that's just way too much. We have a playbook that we're gonna send to every single person who came today after this session's over, and you can read that for yourself. But what we're gonna focus on today, which is extremely actionable, you can actually do this like right after this workshop if you want, is we're gonna teach you how you can achieve a 10-minute vocal and mindset warm up to help you get in a very optimal state for your interviews. What do I mean by this? Let's start off with a vocal warm up. Now, a lot of people, you see vocal warm up and you're like, I'm not a singer though. Like, why do I have to warm up? Here's the thing. A lot of people get their interviews at a very, very early time. Maybe that's 8 a.m., 9 a.m., but you haven't spoken yet. And your mouth is not in the ready state to start articulating the individual sounds and vowels that speech necessitates. And when that happens, this is what happens. You start mumbling, you start stuttering, and you're like, "Oh gosh, I'm nervous." And because you think you're nervous, you're like you mumble and you stutter even more, and this creates a physiological feedback loop. And that loop is what causes blanking. So we want to prevent this. How? It's actually way easier than you think. We recommend that you do what's called articulation exercises. Articulation. Articulation meaning speaking words in a way that's very crisp and clear to hear. The opposite of articulation is when you mumble and you talk like this and you can't make out the individual words because your words are not coming out in a way that people can actually understand. So, how do we practice this? And I really recommend that we all practice this together
Mm.
because we can do this together. So here's the classic one. It's Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers. Now I want every single person in this Zoom call right now. I don't care if you're in a library. I've done this in the library many times, but we're gonna do this together, and I want you to say that sentence out loud as slowly as possible and really exaggerate your mouth movements, okay? Perfect. Five, four, three, two, one. Peter
Peter
Piper
Piper
picked
picked a
a
peck
peck
of
of pickled
pickled
peppers.
peppers.
How was that? Tell us in the chat. Was that easy, hard? Okay, if that was too easy for you, don't worry. We have an even harder version, and this is gonna help warm up your mouth muscles even more. So if you have a pen, if you don't have a pen, if you have a stick, if you don't have a stick, something that's like long and that you can fit in your mouth without causing an injury, hopefully, and then afterwards, you're gonna use that pen or stick or whatever, and you're gonna put it in between your teeth just like this. And you're gonna do the exact same thing very, very slowly, okay? So,
Alrighty.
Peter
Peter
Piper
Piper
picked
picked a
a
peck
peck
of
of
pickled
pickled
peppers.
peppers. How was that?
That was harder.
I'm glad I made you laugh, Christina. Okay, but if you did that make your mouth movements easier, more smooth? Yeah? Great. So that's one example. Another example is red lorry, yellow lorry. And this stresses more so the R's and the L's.
Mm.
Um, let's try to do this together. You don't have to use your pen if you don't want to, but let's try this together once, and then finally we'll try this together as fast as possible. Let's start off slow first, okay? Three, two, one. Red,
Red
lorry,
lorry,
yellow,
yellow
lorry,
lorry.
red,
Red
lorry,
lorry,
yellow,
yellow
lorry.
lorry.
Amazing. Okay, if you thought that was too easy, we're gonna say the exact same thing, but way faster. Are you ready? Amazing. Three, two, one. Red
Red
lorry,
lorry,
yellow
yellow
lorry,
lorry. Red
red lorry,
lorry,
yellow
yellow
lorry.
lorry.
Okay, are our mouths feeling warmed up? Let us know in the chat. If not in the chat, let us know with your faces. Yes, amazing. Okay. Super. Yes, I love that. Okay, so that's a vocal warm up. And notice how easy it is, but now it's so much easier. Even for me right now, I'm like, damn, it's so much easier to speak. Like, what the hell? That's a vocal warm up. Another thing you can do is what's called a mental warm up. And a lot of here's the thing that we often notice is people think that right before an interview, you can cram all your notes, you can cram all your scripts, and that's going to help you remember better. In reality, though, that's only going to hijack your working memory and make your mind more rigid. We don't want that. We want to be primed for a state of what's called cognitive flexibility. Why do we want that? Because if your mind is flexible and more agile, it helps you adapt to more unpredictable situations, which
Mm.
oftentimes comes up in an interview. And to do that, This is actually something that I learned from doing improv for 2 years, and I think this is going to really help you. If even if you haven't done improv before, this is going to really help you. And what I do is what's called a yes and warm up. What's a yes and warm up? It's when you start every single sentence with a yes and mentality. Now, before I do the yes and version, I actually want to demo the yes but version just to show you the contrast between having a yes but or a rigid mentality versus a more flexible and positive yes and mentality. Okay, so Madeline, I'm gonna role play this with you. And what
Ready?
I'm gonna do is I'm gonna have a scenario. So remember the time that we went grocery shopping at Costco last week? And I want you to start every single sentence with, yeah, but. Okay?
Sounds good.
Perfect. So remember the time we went grocery shopping at Costco last week?
Yeah, but they didn't have any samples.
Yeah, but I think there was still enough for us to purchase, wasn't there?
Yeah, but I thought you don't purchase samples.
Yeah, but we still had money, so we could have done something with our money, even if it wasn't the samples.
Yeah, but it was really full. It was busy in there.
Yeah, but I still feel like we could have used our time wisely by doing something with our money at Costco.
Yeah, but at the same time, it took too long.
Okay, let's end that there. But Madeline, I want to ask you, how was doing that with me? Like
It was
easy?
hard. It was challenging.
Right?
Yep.
It was hard
Didn't
because
flow
when you
well.
start with a yes but mentality, which is when your mind's rigid, it's so much harder to build. So what I'm going to do instead now is we're going to do the another scenario, but this time we're going to start every single sentence with yes and.
Hmm.
So here's our scenario. Madeline, remember the time that we went to the beach? And I want you to
Yes.
start. Okay, yeah,
Okay.
perfect.
Oh, I was
Keep
ready.
going.
Yes. And we forgot our towels though, so we couldn't swim.
That was a yes, but
Oh, was
start
it a
yes
butt?
and.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
No, no, no,
That
you're
was
good.
no, you're right. Yes, and we had a great time swimming.
Yes, and we saw so many fish, and we saw the ocean lapping with the waves.
Yes, and do you remember seeing that one surfer who fell off his surfboard?
Yes, and it looked so painful. And I feel like this happens to so many people who go surfing.
Yes, and at the same time, I would like to try surfing for sure.
Yes. And you know what? Not just surfing, but we should try snorkeling too.
Yes, and maybe one day we can attempt scuba diving.
Yes, and we can find all the fish in the sea.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, let's end that there. But notice how that was so much easier.
Yeah.
It flowed so much more smoothly. And you're probably wondering, like, how is that relevant to my interview? Here's how this is relevant. When you get asked a really challenging question, instead of starting off with a yes but rigid mentality of like, oh shit, that's a really hard question. What do I say? What do I say? What do I say? You're gonna start with a yes and mentality and just love the question. So let me give you an example. Like last week, I remember I was asked for an interview, like, if you were an object, which one would you be? And instead of being like, okay, that's a really weird question, like, why would you ask me that? I said, thank you so much for your question. I love your question because it really shows you value creativity and flexibility at your workplace. Boom. And all of a sudden, it was so much easier to tap in to that creativity and flexibility. Right? So that's why we highly recommend that you can do this on your own, with a partner, with a friend, your dog, if you want to too. But start with a scenario and just start every single sentence with yes, and I blah, 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 blah. And I guarantee you, your mind is going to be so much more agile and so much more primed for an unpredictable situation. Okay, so I want to pass it off to Madeline now to speak more on what happens if you do end up blanking.
Perfect. Okay, thanks so much, Jeffrey. So let's say you're in the interview and worst situation happens, you mind blank, you don't know what to do, you're panicking, everything is just becoming more heightened. This is what I want you to remember. So, I'm going to dive into three different scenarios. And the reason we're looking into this more specifically is because you have to first diagnose what is causing your mind blank. So, the first situation is scenario one. So, this is where you know what to say, but your anxiety is rising and taking over, and it's becoming more and more overwhelming. And what is likely happening here is your attention is actually splitting. So, half of your mind is focused on what you're saying, the content of your response, but the other half is almost in like a parallel situation where you're also evaluating your own response. You're kind of critiquing it. You feel like it's not going well. And I want you to really recognize when you're in this split path situation because the interviewer's job is to evaluate your responses. They're trying to determine if you're a good fit for this role. You don't need to also be the judge of your response and to be delivering the content as well as evaluating it because that's taking away from your ability to fully invest your energy into what you're saying. So, the first step that you need to do when it comes to any kind of anxiety situation is to regulate first. You're calming the physiological aspect because you can't think until your body is reset. Simple, deep breath, long exhale, slow down. Anxiety wants you to rush through this interview because it's signaling danger, danger. You want to get it over with as fast as possible. But the only way to actually get through it is to slow everything down. So you're taking that deep breath. And then you're focusing on your single channel rule. This is what we call the difference between speaking and focusing on what you're saying versus judging what you're saying and evaluating it, but making sure you're not doing both at the same time. You want to spend 80 to 90% of your interview energy on this speaking channel, not that voice who's saying, "Oh, this doesn't sound right. This is coming off weird. You're not going to get the job. What's going to happen?" All of the pressure and performance, etc. That's number two. Number three is to shift the goal of your focus. So, oftentimes we want this like perfect, really beautifully, clearly articulate sounding response. But again, that's adding so much pressure to your delivery. Instead, you need to shift your goal to be focusing on just being clear, providing a useful example, and ensuring that that aspect is what's happening rather than sounding super impressive, sounding perfect. Instead, you're focusing on being clear, being useful. Okay, so that was scenario one. Scenario two is when you know what to say, but it's just coming out so rambly and unstructured, and kind of like as you're saying it, you don't even know where it's going. The reason this is happening is because, again, that anxiety is focusing on speed of the response, not organization. And when it comes to the STAR interview method, I'm sure everyone's heard of this. And oftentimes people think, oh, we need STAR because that's what the interviewer wants. But
Mhm.
actually, the STAR structure is a thinking tool for you. It helps you organize what you're going to say in what order and making sure you deliver the results rather and to help you essentially organize your thoughts rather than just be a tool for communication. So, when it comes to scenario two, the goal is to reduce your cognitive load by finding a structure. So, in the next slide, we have three different structures that are alternative options to the star. And what you want to do is you want to choose one of those responses and then tell the interviewer which structure you're going to choose. And we call this signposting. So imagine you're on the road, you see a sign, it's got three different directions. You know what is going to come up based on these directions that are ahead of you. So, this idea of signposting helps you kind of bring the interviewer along on this journey that you're about to share, but it also commits you to a structure, and then everyone can move forward on this path. So I'll hand this over to Jeffrey to highlight like what this diagram looks like here.
Yes. So, like you said, Madeline, a lot of people, when they practice interviews, the STAR method is like status quo. That's what everyone uses. But the thing is that if you only practice using the STAR method, it's going to actually backfire because that's the only way that you know how to practice. Now, what ends up happening is that if you stick religiously with STAR, you lose a lot of flexibility to answer some questions that might not actually be well adapted for a STAR structured response. So that's exactly why here as examples, there's other potential structures that you can use that aren't STAR that can help you in certain questions. One example, so if you get asked a behavioral question like, tell me about a time that you failed at your workplace, you don't have to use STAR. You can use problem, action, result. The challenge, what you did, and what the outcome is. Another example is if someone asks for your strengths or for your leadership style, you can use point, reason, example. Like, what's a strength? What's a reason for that strength? What's an example of that strength? What's a story of that strength? That might help you more than a traditional star method. But the point here is not that star is bad, is that choose more structures than you think than just star in order to promote that cognitive flexibility, which is going to really help you when it comes that you get like a curveball question or you start like feeling that blanking state come in your interviews.
Awesome. All right. Okay, so that was scenario one and two. The third scenario is kind of our biggest fear. You genuinely don't know what to say. It's the ultimate mind blank, and you don't even know where to start. Step one, you're just buying yourself a little bit of time to reduce your panic. So these options are like, let me think for a moment. Can I clarify one thing before I answer? Oh, that's a really interesting question. I'm gonna think about it. Some kind of thing where you can start talking, so there's not this terrifyingly long pause, but you're not committing to an answer or even a structure just yet. Step two is about choosing your path. So you have to make this decision fairly quickly. You have to figure out what your approach is going to be. So I have examples on the next slide that kind of like highlights what this looks like. First one is if you like misunderstand the question, you're not really sure what they're getting at, you want to clarify and restate. This allows you to highlight, like, okay, I think this is where you're going with this question. Is this what you were thinking? And so by doing that, again, it allows you to start talking and it allows you to highlight that you know something about this. You think this is what they're getting at, but you just want to clarify before you dive into a potential response. Okay, option two is when you simply don't have that experience. And this often happens. They're asking you a question, tell me a time when you did da da da, and you don't have a time. But you probably have a similar experience. And this is where that story mapping can come in and be really helpful, where you see parallels with situations and you want to bridge to a similar one. So we have examples in the next one that'll show you exactly what that looks like. But option three is if you really don't know, you don't have a similar example, this is where you're just going to talk through your approach. So it almost becomes a situational type interview question, which is the what would you do in this situation? And you're going to label your assumptions that you have about some of the key terms, what's going on, what are some principles that you can draw on to highlight the steps that you would take to do this thing. So, for example, here, if you're clarifying and restating, this is what the example might look like. So, just to confirm, you're asking about this in the context of this, right? And they can say, yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. Or, no, actually, I was thinking more so in this context. Another way to kind of clarify an assumption is like, okay, I'm just gonna make one assumption about what you mean by a high stakes client, and if that's off, I can provide a different example. Other examples for scenario two, for option two and three would be that bridging to the related competency or experience. So For example, you've got a similar experience and you think it can work, but you have nothing else to draw on, you're just going to commit to that. So you're saying something like, okay, I haven't done X exactly, but I have done Y, which actually requires the same skill of da 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 da, which you have, and that you know that's what they're looking for in that question. And then the process answer, just the example of that, is looking something like this. So you say, I haven't actually encountered that directly, but thinking about this more, my approach would be first, da da da, then I would probably do this, and then I'll check to make sure this. And that actually highlights that example that we had on that diagram, which was first, then finally. So big picture, really zooming out here, is when you're blanking under pressure, what you need to do is quickly assess, okay, why am I blanking? Is it because I'm really anxious? I'm just so concerned with this performance state. I'm actually judging how I'm thinking, and that is anxiety taking over. You now know what to do. You're just removing that judgment. You're focusing on the single channel solution. Or is it a structure issue where you kind of know what to say, but you have no idea how you're actually going to deliver this? That's where you want to understand these different frameworks and figure out, okay, I'm actually going to use um, the PAR framework, just pop that in there and go with that. Or is this uncertainty and a complete lack of knowledge? Then you're reframing, you're bridging, you're clarifying assumptions, and this allows you to start talking about the question before you need to finally deliver an answer, which is often the big stressful part for people where it's a mind blank and then it's silence, and the longer the silence exists, the more stressed people get. So I want to hear in the comments which one resonates with you the most. Which one are you most looking forward to trying when slash if you do blank under pressure?
Oh, sorry.
For me, I definitely think that structure aspect is something that's useful because oftentimes we think like I don't have an example and I don't have a star story, but there's actually different ways to structure what you want to say that's not necessarily
Mm.
committed to the star. So is anyone feeling like one of these different results could be useful to them moving forward? Love that. Okay, Christina's saying, honestly, all of them would be useful. Hey, that is fantastic. That totally works. Jesse's saying uncertainty one. Yep, yep. Alan, the reframing. I think I have some tools around structure that's really useful. Awesome. And that's the other thing too, Nicola, is there are so many different structural answers that can work. These are just three of them. So really it's about reducing that cognitive load and then figuring out how you can deliver it. What else are we saying? Uncertainty is for you as well. Anxiety, says Allison. That is awesome. Okay, I'll pass it over to Jeffrey then.
Yeah, so we're actually really good on time, which I'm so surprised about because we had so much content. But we want to thank you for showing up tonight. We know it's been a very busy day for every single person here. So we have an entire 25-page anti-blanking playbook that we're going to send off to every single attendee that showed up tonight to thank you for your attendance. And in this playbook, we're going to cover more about what we mean by story mapping. We're going to cover more about what we mean when we say structure. And we have some AI prompts that you can try out at home to help you during your preparation process.
Awesome. Okay, so thank you so much for coming. This is everything that we have to discuss right now. I, as I mentioned in the beginning, am a job interview coach, love working with people who are struggling with interview anxiety. So if you are tired of over preparing, overthinking, underperforming in interviews, right now, I have a free interview anxiety strategy call where we'll just unpack how is interview anxiety affecting you before, during, and after the interview. So this is a completely free call. We're going to diagnose what's going on and how it's actually impacting your performance. So If that's something that resonates with you, QR code is right there. Book a spot for next week, and then we can dive into this right away. Or if you have an interview coming up and you're super nervous, that can be something that can also work well for you. Just some last minute preparation. Figure out where the anxiety is impacting you the most.
Yes, and a note on the chat of how we get the guide. Don't worry, we're going to send every single person who attended tonight the guide through email. We have all your names down. You're going to get that guide right after the workshop is over. Now, what I do personally, so Madeline does a lot of interview stuff. I personally do a lot of public speaking coaching, storytelling coaching. So if you have a pitch, a longer talk, or you just want to know more about what I do, feel free to book a chat with me using the right QR code. But otherwise, this has been a really fantastic, efficient workshop, if I do say so myself.
Mm-hmm. We
Thank you,
packed in so
everyone, for
much
showing up.
information.
And if you have
Mm-hmm.
any questions at all,
Yeah,
we have 5 minutes. We planned this, by the way. We planned a perfect timing of 5 minutes right before the workshop ended to make
we
sure that we had
did.
a Q&A. If you have any questions, let us know and we'll stay
Yeah.
behind to go answer them.
Yeah, whether it's about mind blanking, interview anxiety, performance pressure, this is absolutely our jam. And you'll get the recording for this session afterwards, okay? So you'll get that through the Maven email too.